So, a couple years ago, when these drugs were in really high demand, the FDA actually announced that there was a shortage. And because the FDA announced this shortage, compounding pharmacies were able to come in and create different variations of these drugs so that people who did need the drugs would still be able to get them while these big companies like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk were doing what they needed to do in terms of production to get their production values up to where they need to be to supply the demand. Last week, it was announced that the shortage has been resolved. So, this could sound like good news for those who want to get their hands on the drugs without having to wait weeks upon weeks or even months for their drug to be available. However, this could be a big problem for those who are getting their drugs from compounding pharmacies because they maybe originally could not get the drug or they were seeking a drug that was less expensive. So, because of this, the compounding pharmacies are now going to sue the FDA over their inability to sell these compounded formulas that they've created over the past 2 years that they have been selling and supplying to patients. Aside from the side effects, this has always been one of my major concerns with these drugs is the availability in general. This is still an issue of availability. And the way that I see this playing out is that people have not actually made the necessary lifestyle changes. And therefore, when they're unable to get these drugs, they will likely fall right back into the same habits and the same patterns where they were before. If you're someone who's using one of these compounding pharmacies, here is my advice to you. Start talking with your provider about options for titrating down on your dosage so your body can start to adapt to you not being on the medication. One of the biggest issues I've seen with people who've taken this, like when the shortage was happening, is when they would go in for their next dose, go in to pick up their prescription, and the prescription just wasn't there and they did not have the time to mentally or otherwise adapt to no longer being on the medication. Secondly, start to work on your relationship with food. Because drugs like this are generally going to slow your digestion, they kind of have a little bit of an appetite suppressing impact. And so once you remove that, the way that you can further work on suppressing your appetite is to make sure that your meal timing is correct. So that means eating every 3 to 4 hours. That means eating within about 30 minutes of waking and just being very cognizant about the types of foods that you're eating as well. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?